Human epidemiology studies, I think, may be currently adequate for looking at events that are fairly closely associated in time with the exposure itself. So you can look at behavioral effects while somebody is actually being exposed to cell phone radiation. You can look at effects on the immune system or something of that nature. But the thing that we're most concerned about is chronic effects, long-term, after long-term use, and things that may take many, many years to develop. A lot of the epidemiology studies that have been done, the interferon studies, for example, suffer from the weaknesses that all of the participants acknowledge with respect to the fact that they rely on recall of how much one uses a telephone. They rely on, and this in fact introduces some biases that are inherent in these kinds of retrospective, what are called retrospective case control studies. But the other major problem with epidemiological studies at this point is that there's only, as you mentioned in your opening remarks, there's only been 10 or 12 years of exposure to these agents, and it's increasing dramatically. And there have been some hints recently that there is an increase in brain cancers in people who have used these cellular communication devices for a number of years.
Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You had mentioned children. What are the considerations with respect to an additional potential risk for children using cell phones?
Yes. What was the question?
What is the potential additional risk for children using cell phones? I read in the literature, to give you a little help, that the brain formation in its early stages may raise an additional susceptibility. Is there something to that?
I think with respect to many exposures to many agents, as we study more and more agents and look at different life stages where these agents are being exposed to children or to animals who are...
Well, let's not take up animals. How about children? Is there a significant risk there? I've got 5 minutes, Dr. Bucher.
Children have a configuration of their skull that does allow penetration of cell phone radiation deeper.
Are you saying there's a potentially greater risk?
I'm saying there potentially is a greater risk.
And what limitations, if any, that any parents are watching this on C-SPAN, what should they do?
I wish I had a good answer to that. I think that...
Well, would there be a precautionary approach? I understand some of the foreign countries are recommending that there be a limitation. Is that true? Of use of cell phones?
Yes, that is true.
Would you recommend that?
I don't think we're in a position yet to make that recommendation.
How about the use of earphones to minimize risk?
I think that's a good idea.
How would you do that specifically?
I understand that specific materials such as the Bluetooth configuration do reduce the exposure. That's my understanding.
Okay, would you pursue that question and inform the subcommittee so we can inform the public something more precise?
Yes.
Also with respect to the children, something more definitive. There's a $24 million study underway. Is that adequate being conducted by the federal agency?
This study is going to address one of the 3 aspects of the research program, and I think from the standpoint of the animal experimental data, it will be a state-of-the-art study, and it will answer...
Sufficient.
It will answer the questions to the best of the ability of that technology.
Should there be studies on humans in the United States as there are elsewhere?
I certainly would suggest that there should be studies on humans, yes.
That would take extra funding.
I believe it would.
Would you give the subcommittee a recommendation on what sort of studies you'd recommend for humans and what the cost would be?
I could do that. I can't do that now. I could do that.
Tomorrow? I know you can't do that now, but do it as soon as you can.
Okay.
The private companies have made contributions to some of the studies. It's my understanding. Are you aware of that and to what extent the private companies are helping?
Yes, to some extent. I know there have been some studies that have looked at the literature with respect to who is funding particular investigators. And the one study that I recall indicated that about 20% of the papers that are published from studies do acknowledge that there is funding from private.
Well, studies which look at the literature don't really go too far. Are there studies which do research beyond the research which has been done to be put in the current literature?
That's an area that's very difficult to answer. I don't know that I can answer that question.
Okay, could you study that subject and give us a written response?
I will, Senator.
I note in the briefing materials that cell phones should not be used in areas where reception is weak or blocked, such as in elevators or trains. Is that so, and if so, why?
I believe that is correct because the power that's required to reach the cell base station is higher in those situations. Therefore, there's more radio frequency radiation transmitted.
Well, in an elevator, my phone customarily conks out. Is there more frequency which is imposed when I'm in an elevator with my cell phone?
I believe that's the case because the cell phone is still attempting to reach the base station.
Well, when a red light went on with our last comments, would you give us a more definitive answer to that as to exactly what is involved and why there ought to be extra precautions under those circumstances in an elevator or similar circumstances?
I will do that.
Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Senator Pryor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for your leadership on this. Dr. Beaker, let me ask, you may have covered this in your opening statement, I missed it, but how long will it take you to do your analysis?
For the particular studies that I was describing, the analysis will be taking place in 2013 and will be reported in 2014.
And why does it take so long? Just because it takes that long in the lab to
Well,
put that together?
there is about a 3-year time in which the animals will be exposed. And it takes about a year to analyze the study after that.
Will there be any preliminary numbers, or will we have to wait till the end to know where
There-
this is going?
It's a 3-phase study, and there will be information available from the first 2 stages earlier than that. But they won't be as definitive with respect to outcomes such as cancer.
Do you know if wireless phones were tested by anyone before they came on the market? Do you know the history of that, and you know how much testing was done or not done?
With respect to health-related testing, I do not know the answer to that. I can find...
And I think there'd be a lot of people that would be curious about that to know if anything was done. And my sense is that there are people who have very strong suspicions about this, but I think we need to look closely at the science and locate the studies. And I appreciate your efforts and what you're trying to do. Are there other studies going on, either in this country or around the world, that you're aware of?
There are many, many studies still going on around the world. Yes.
In other words, yours won't be the first data that's released. We'll see other things between now and 2013.
I'm sure you will, yes.
Okay. Are most of those going on in the U.S., or are they going on in other countries, or
I don't know the answer to that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Pryor.